In this Biomutant video, we're going to be taking a look at the perks for each class and doing sort of a deep dive into these. I do have express permission from THQ Nordic in order to show you this footage, so I do have that. And I'm going to clear up some misconceptions about classes and perks that have been spread far and wide all over the internet, mostly by people who have not played the game yet. I can assure you I have played this game quite a bit, so I'm going to get into that from the perspective of someone who has played the game and who knows what the hell they're talking about. So the first thing I want to talk about is the Mercenary class. This was absent from our character creation video if you watched that, because we were only allowed to show very specific footage, and that did not include the Mercenary. Now I can show this to you, so you're going to get to see this. And this is a paid class. That means that if you do not pre-order the game, you'll have to buy this class in order to play it. But if you pre-order it, you get it as sort of a reward for pre-ordering. So consider that. We're going to go through this and discuss why you may or may not want to do that. The first thing we're going to discuss about the Mercenary is its starting perks, namely Twin Silver Grip and Fury. Twin Silver Grip allows you to dual-wield one-handed melee weapons, and Fury increases your melee damage by 10%. So you'll also notice that the Saboteur class comes with Twin Silver Grip as a starting perk. So the Mercenary is not the only class that begins the game with this. But in fact, this perk is actually not unique to either of these classes and could be obtained by any character in the game, no matter their class. And it's actually located inside the Wung Fu. So if you were looking through footage or other videos and you haven't seen it, it's actually located inside Wung Fu, even though it's technically classified as a perk. So if you were worried about, okay, do I have to pick Mercenary or Saboteur, or if I don't pre-order and I don't get Mercenary, am I stuck with Saboteur for my dual wield? That's not the case. You can play any class for that. However, there may be reasons why you want to pick these classes, and we're going to get into that now. So looking over the perks of the Mercenary class, you're going to get Mega Mind, Reflexes, Invincibility, and Brutality for the other 4 perks. You'll notice that if you compare Saboteur here, both of these classes both have Reflexes. So if you're doing a direct comparison, they both have Twin Silver Grip and they both have Reflexes, but that's where they end. Reflexes actually gives you a chance for ranged attacks to miss you when they're firing, which is great, especially if you're playing a melee class, because a lot of times when you're playing melee, you're focused on the guy in front of you, and you're not paying attention to the guys that are shooting at you behind them, so this can prevent you from taking a little bit of damage. The next perk here, Mega Mind, essentially gives you 20% ki regeneration. Ki is used for jumping, dodging, it's used for Psi powers, which is why the Psi-Freak class also has this perk. It's a beginning perk for them. But these are the only 2 classes that have access to this. So if you're dodging a lot, jumping a lot, this is good. That's particularly true in melee combat, so this is not a bad perk for this class. The next perk is Invincibility, and this is going to increase your armor value as well as the damage you deal with melee attacks by 20% when you're at full health. This is actually shared with the Sentinel class, so the Sentinel class has this perk as well, and these are the only 2 classes that have these perks. This is an interesting perk because you tend to get hit more when you're playing a melee build than a ranged build, so it's going to be difficult in order to keep your health at 100%. So you might have to find ways to recover health in combat while you're fighting in order to make this happen, or just get better at it in general. But having that increased armor and damage while you're at full health is going to help you, particularly if you're really good at the game, because you're going to get that extra 20%. And of course, the last perk here is Brutality, which is going to increase your critical damage with melee attacks by 10%. So if you're playing a pure melee build, you're going to see the most benefit from this, of course. So what's really interesting about this class is that it does share Fury and Brutality with the Commando class. So it technically has perks that are made up of perks from all other classes, technically. But Fury and Brutality on Commando only apply to ranged attacks, whereas they apply to melee attacks for the Mercenary class. So even though these are named the same, they effectively have different effects. What this means is that the Mercenary has plus 10% melee damage, it has plus 10% critical melee damage, it has plus 20% ki regeneration, it has plus 20% melee damage at full health, and it has a 10% chance to dodge ranged attacks, making it the best pure melee class in the game, hands down. So if you want to play a pure melee build in this game, or that is your ambition before you start playing, you're going to want to pre-order the game, because that Mercenary class is the best in slot if you're talking about min-maxing for this game. Now, the difficulty of this game, in my opinion, is not such that you need to min-max, and obviously there are different difficulty levels, so you can set the difficulty down, and if that's not important to you, then that's fine. But if you are a min-maxer, this is hands down the best class for a melee build, dual-wield or not. So the next class we're going to take a look at here is Saboteur. This isn't exactly the order of character creation, but I kind of wanted to do a comparison, because if you're looking at Mercenary or Saboteur for your build, let's compare them and see why I feel like Mercenary is the better of the 2 classes. So taking a look at character creation, Saboteurs also get Twin Silver Grip, as we already discussed, allowing them to dual wield as well, right out of the gate, even though anyone can. But they also gain Hypergenetic instead of Fury, so instead of plus 10% melee damage, their dodge cost is reduced by 20%. It costs about 10 key energy to dodge in this game. That means you're reducing that by 2. So instead of 10, you're spending 8 key to dodge. That is not very much. That's not a very big reduction in energy cost, and I feel like plus 10% melee damage is a much better starting bonus. Moving along, they have reflexes as well, just like the Mercenary, which allows them a chance to dodge ranged attacks, which is great. Then they have the Agile perk, which increases their dodge distance by 20%. This is very good. Like, it's not a terrible perk to have, but generally speaking, you want to kill things faster, and dodging further isn't going to make that happen. Their next perk, Moving Target, makes it so that their basic movement speed in combat is increased by 5%. That is a tiny, tiny amount. I'm not even sure if you'll notice. One of the melee attacks that you use right out of the gate in any combat scenario automatically rushes you to the target no matter what weapon you're using or what class you are. So I don't feel like this is going to benefit you at all. The last perk they gain, which is Evasive, increases their armor by 20% while dodging or in the air. In my opinion, the game isn't difficult enough to warrant needing that much more armor. If you keep improving your armor with the stuff you pick up, even on the hardest difficulty, you don't take that much damage as long as your vitality isn't like 10. You're going to be fine. So again, killing things faster, in my opinion, makes combat go faster. It makes it more fun. And also you take less damage when things die faster. So between the two, I think you're getting a much, much better deal with Mercenary because the game rewards offensive play and you're much more offensive with a Mercenary. We're going to move to Sentinel next. And the reason here is because I feel like out of all the other classes remaining, Sentinel might be the only class where you play and you go like, you know what, I want to try maybe making a melee build with this class. And so with the information about melee fresh in your head, I want to compare this class to those two classes so you can get an idea if you wanted to go Sentinel and melee, which you can, why you may or may not want to do that. So taking a look at their starting perk here, Toughness increases base armor by 10. This is probably the worst starting perk in the game. 10 armor, just to give you an idea, like by the time you get, later into the game, armor starts getting into the 50, 60, 70 range for one chest piece. So that's about, 15% value of that. Again, you don't tend to die very easily, particularly if you have any points in vitality. So this isn't super good. Their next perk is Medic, which increases the health you gain from items and in general. So if you, use a consumable that regenerates health, it's going to give you more. Or if you're regenerating health outside of combat, it's going to go faster. This isn't a terrible perk, but it's also not a great perk. Ricochet is sort of like a more advanced version of reflexes. Instead of missing a ranged attack, you're going to reflect it back at the attacker 10% of the time, which is great. Again, it's not that often, but when it does happen, you're going to be real happy about it. They also have the Invincibility perk, as I mentioned. This is shared with the Mercenary class. They gain increased armor and melee damage when full health by 20%. This is fantastic. If you're planning on making a melee build, this is really, really good. It's probably one of the best perks you can have for a melee build, and Sentinel has it and Mercenary has it. So I think probably just because of this one perk alone, Sentinel may have an edge over Saboteur if you want to play melee. That and the addition of the fact that they actually start with a two-handed melee weapon. And in my opinion, two-handed melee weapons just seem to outperform one-handed melee weapons, especially even if they're dual-wielded. And their last perk, Knock, makes it so when they dodge into smaller enemies, they stumble and fall. So you can knock down enemies by dodging through them. That can be very, very handy if you're fighting a lot of enemies. It's not the greatest perk in the world because, frankly, you're just trying to kill things quickly, but maybe you knock them down and then you pummel them with your weapon, and that works fine. It's a very unique perk, and it's not that bad. Next, I want to talk about the Deadeye class. This class comes with Perfect Reload, which basically gives you a little prompt when you're almost out of ammo. If you hit the RB button on your controller, I can't remember what it is on keyboard, you'll auto-reload your weapon, and you'll be able to fire again instantly. Normally, when you're fighting with ranged weapons, when you run out of ammo, your weapon has to reload, and it takes somewhere between 3 to 5 seconds, depending on how big your magazine is. This basically skips that by reloading early if you hit that window, and you get a damage increase to your next magazine when you do it. So if you have this perk, you're probably going to lean towards the range side of things because you never have to stop firing. You're just going to keep firing, reload, quick reload, fire, quick reload, perfect reload over and over and over, and there's no real need to mix in melee with ranged while your ranged weapon is reloading. Perfect Reload is actually a general perk, meaning any class in the game can get it. So it's not unique to the Deadeye class, but it's a really good one to start with because it means you can, play a ranged style right out of the gate, whereas other classes will have to save up perk points in order to get this, and which means they won't be able to get it probably by until level 4 or 5, depending on how much they save up their perk points. Moving along to the perks of the Deadeye class, the first one you can unlock is called Crackshot. This makes it so your non-automatic rifles inflict 20% more damage. This is really, really big. There are a lot of regular rifles in the game that just don't have the, attack speed or fire speed of the automatic rifles that deal lots and lots of damage. making that go up by 20% is huge. That is a very, very good perk if you plan to use rifles. They also gain the quick reload perk, which increases the reload time for the ranged weapons, and you might be thinking, why would I need reload time if I can perfect reload? Well, let me tell you, you mess it up sometimes. You just do. Sometimes you aren't paying attention, or things happen and you mess it up. This will increase that reload time that happens sometimes when you screw up your perfect reload. The sniper perk makes it so that non-automatic rifles have an extra 10% critical chance on top of whatever critical chance you already have, which is fantastic. You can deal a lot of damage with critical hits in this game, and I actually have a build coming that revolves specifically around that. But again, you're getting the idea here that Deadeye is very, very good, or excels with non-automatic rifles. So if you plan to play a build with non-automatic rifles, then this is definitely going to be the class for you. Moving along to the Gunslinger perk, this makes it so that your dual-wielded pistols have 20% increased rate of fire. This is a bit strange for this class because you can see the theme is non-automatic rifles with the increased damage and increased crit chance. I don't know why you would pass that up to use these pistols. Either way, if you pick the pistols, then you miss out on those perks, and if you pick the rifle, then you miss out on this perk. So this is a bit of a weird place for this to be. And this brings us to Sharpshooter, which is essentially the granddaddy of all perks in Biomutant, and this increases your two-handed gun damage by 100%. So if you're using a rifle, an automatic rifle, a shotgun, all that damage is going to be increased by 100%. And this further reinforces why would you have that Gunslinger perk here. This perk alone is worth taking this class for. If you plan to use an automatic rifle, if you plan to use a shotgun, or if you plan to use a non-automatic rifle, you're going to take this class because of this perk. It's not available to any other class. And obviously, since there's other perks that lean towards non-automatic rifles, you're going to perform the best with non-automatic rifles, but you can still do relatively well even with those other two types. And that brings us to the Commando class. You might be thinking, why the hell would I play Commando now that Deadeye has the best perk in the game that doubles your damage if you're using two-handed weapons? Just go do that. I understand the question, and I'm going to explain it to you. So the reason to play Commando, in my opinion, is that you really gain no benefit from Deadeye if you dual-wield pistols. Commando, you get much more benefit if you're dual-wielding pistols. So if you plan to play a dual pistol-wielding build, then you're probably going to want to play Commando. What makes this kind of bizarre, though, is that just about every class starts with a pistol, but the Commando. The Commando starts with an automatic rifle. So as a Commando, you got to go find pistols, and as every other class, you got to go find a rifle. It's kind of weird. The starting perk for the Commando is Fury, which increases their ranged weapon attack damage by 10%, as we already discussed. This applies to all ranged weapons, pistols, shotguns, rifles, whatever. So you don't have to choose right at the beginning of the game which weapon you want. You can play around with different weapons, and that's fine. But I'm going to show you why you may want to play pistols if you play this class. The next perk is Stimulus. This makes it so that your armor and melee damage is increased by 20% when your health drops below 20%. This is a very bad perk because you don't want to keep your health below 20%. If you're doing that, you might die in one hit. So you're probably not going to take this perk, and if you do, it's probably not going to come into play very often. Adrenaline is in the same boat here. Your attack speed with melee weapons is increased by 10% when your health drops below 20%. You don't want to keep your health low. That's bad. It's much better to keep your health high and get bonuses than keep your health where you could be one-shot and die. So again, you probably won't take this, particularly if you're playing a double pistols build or a ranged weapon build. You're not going to be meleeing much. Shotgun is a perk that makes it so you have a 5% chance to stun a small enemy per hit inflicted. This is another really bad perk, because if you have a shotgun, your damage is probably the highest per shot in-game. And you're going to want to try and one- or two-shot small enemies, particularly. You don't want to stun them. That doesn't matter. You just want to kill them. So you probably won't take this one either, and if you do, you probably won't see much benefit from it, except maybe early on in the game. And the last perk here, Brutality, increases your critical damage from ranged attacks by 10%. So basically, if you're playing dual pistols, you're going to get 10% increased damage and 10% increased critical damage. That's the best you can do. Out of all the classes, if you're playing pistols, that is the most benefit you can gain from any classes right here. You can still use other weapons, like this gives you freedom to play the other ranged weapon attacks or weapon types, because this applies to those as well. However, the Deadeye is going to outperform the Commando with auto rifles, and shotguns. So if that leaves to me the only reason you would play Commando is if you're going to dual wield. Okay, moving on to the last class, which is Psi-Freak. They begin the game with Spark Ball and Megamind. Megamind increases your energy regeneration by 20%, which the Mercenary class has. This is really good because you use energy to use your Psi abilities, so you're going to drain your energy a lot. So you can never have enough key regeneration if you're playing a Psi-Freak. The Spark Ball ability is actually unique to the Psi-Freak, so if you don't play a Psi-Freak, you will not be able to get this Psi power. And that's probably the biggest reason to play Psi-Freak, in my opinion, besides the other perks, which I'm going to go into, is that you're going to primarily use Spark Ball a lot, at least early on in the game. You just won't have access to a ton of Psi abilities right away. and Sparkball seems, in my opinion, from my early game testing, to outperform just about any of the other spells you can get early on. So the next perk you're going to get as a Psi-Freak is Nocturnal. This increases your intellect attribute at night, which increases your Psi damage, how much key energy you have, and your key energy regeneration. So you're going to perform a tiny bit better at night. Plus 10 is not a huge amount, but it's not nothing. The next perk you can get is Mind Melt. This increases the chance of your Psi powers to critical hit by 10%. Critical hits are a great way to increase damage, so this is just a good thing to get. Psi powers are not super strong, in my opinion, compared to like ranged builds, so you need all the extra damage you can get, and this is going to increase it by a little bit now and then. Psi Spikes is just a straight-up damage increase to your Psi powers. Again, you need all the damage bonuses you can get as a mage character in this game, so you're definitely going to want to take this one. And Brain Drain makes it so that when you deal damage with one of your Psi powers, you actually regenerate some of your health. This is great for keeping you alive. You tend to dump a lot of points into intellect as a Psi-Freak or a character that's spellcasting if you should choose a different class for some reason, which I don't recommend. This leaves you with often low vitality because you just need to keep pumping intellect to even maintain any sort of respectable damage. So you're not going to put a lot of points in vitality, and this is going to help keep your health topped up where you can play offensively. Looking over those perks, I just don't know how you will play a mage character without playing Psi-Freak. You're going to miss out on damage and critical chance. And there's no like armor that increases your Psi power. There's no weapon that increases your Psi power, at least none that I've found in my some 50 hours of playing. So the only way to increase your Psi damage power is by increasing intellect and taking passives like these perks that increase it. So you need every one of these in order to be competitive. The last thing I want to do is clear up some misinformation about perks. There's been a lot of information spreading around about perks that's been incorrect, mostly by people who haven't played. And I just want to clear this up so you actually understand what's happening here. Each class has 5 perks, okay, that are unique to that class, or maybe they're shared by a different class. But these perks are not available to everyone. Whatever your 5 perks are for your class, those are the 5 perks you're going to have access to besides the general perks list and besides the perks listed in Wung Fu, which namely allow you to dual-wield one-handed weapons or pistols. Everyone has access to dual-wielding one-handed weapons and dual-wielding pistols. Everyone has access to that. Everyone has access to the general perks, but each class only has access to their perks. Again, some of those are shared between classes, but those are the perks you will be stuck with the entire game. You aren't going to gain access to the Psi-Freaks perks if you're playing Deadeye. You're not going to gain access to the Mercenaries perks if you're playing Saboteur. That is just not how the game works. You cannot change your class mid-playthrough to a different class if you decide that you got it wrong. Whatever class you choose during character creation, that is the class you're going to play with for the game and in New Game Plus. The entire reason I made this video is because you're missing this critical piece of information, which is what these perks are during character creation. You see the initial perks that sort of steer you down a path going like, okay, you should probably play this way if you play this, and that's fine. But you don't have access to the perks information, and now that you can see what they all are, you can make a better informed decision about what class you want to play because you know what you're going to gain access to. I hope this video has helped you guys make a better informed decision about what class you want to play so you can sit here and think, okay, this is how I want to play. I know what class I need to get. I know what breed I need to get. And when the game starts, you can just get out the gate running and get into Biomutant and really enjoy Biomutant. Stay tuned because we're also going to have a getting started guide. This is going to be helpful tips to you, either that you might want to know before you start playing or as you start playing the game. It's going to try and remain as spoiler-free as possible. I don't want to ruin the story or the experience for anyone, but just some general information that may make your experience a little bit better if you knew.